All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the premiere episode of Live Free TV right here on the Voluntary Virtues Network, VVN, brought to you by myself, Nathan Frazier, and of course, all the hard work that Michael Shanklin does. First and foremost, I want to say a huge thank you to Michael Shanklin for inviting me to be part of this massive, immense pro-liberty project. I'm honored to be invited to be a part of this. And a huge thank you to all of the other hosts out there that are participating and contributing to this. So, for this first episode of Live Free TV, I figured I would probably give an introduction of myself to you, the viewers, because I'm not famous. I'm not Adam Kokesh or Stefan Kinsella or Stefan Molyneux or Adam Kokesh. I already said Adam Kokesh. I'm not any of these guys, though. I'm not these famous liberty activists. So a lot of you guys watching this right now are like, who the hell is this guy? So I will tell you who the hell this guy is. My name is Nathan Frazier. I do a once a week radio broadcast on Live Free FM, or that's the name of my radio broadcast at least. You can go and check out archives of that show because it's super fantastic. You can go check that out over at livefreefm.com. It broadcasts live from Truth Frequency Radio at truthfrequencyradio.com. Also simulcast on ucy.tv. That's ucy.tv. And also plays here in the local Denver, Colorado area on 90.7 FM. And I've been doing that show for about 4 years now. So if you haven't heard about it, that's because I'm a crappy marketer. For somebody who believes in capitalism and free markets, I'm not that effective at marketing, apparently. So who am I, and how did I come to the current and longest-lasting political philosophy position that I now hold, which is, some people might call it volunteerism, some people might call it Anarcho-Capitalism. I guess if I self-identified it with a title, it would just be anarchist. More accurately, probably like free market anarchist. And that is not where I started out at on my path to where I eventually landed. So I'm going to talk today about, give myself a little bit of an introduction to the viewers and let you know kind of where I come from. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start with that. As you can tell, I have a lot of tattoos. Stefan Molyneux would probably say that's because I had a horrible childhood, and he would be correct. I don't know if that's causation being mixed up with correlation, or I don't know. I don't know if my childhood had anything to do with the fact that I got addicted to tattoos when I got older, but I'm probably the most tattooed guy in the liberty movement, so maybe that'll be my claim to fame. I don't know. I grew up poor. I grew up on welfare. It was me, my two younger sisters, and my little brother growing up with a mother who, for various different reasons, was not able to hold a job. And maybe in the future I'll get into kind of some of the issues that we went through as children, and some of the state influences that really kind of, well, they say that welfare should be like a safety net, but it's kind of a net with a bunch of hooks in it. And it seemed like growing up, the welfare system wasn't really designed to help us out as much as it was designed to keep us dependent on government aid. So since I turned like 15 years old, which was, oh my God, I'm trying not to date myself, but that was like about 20 years ago now. Ever since I turned 15 years old, I have been very hardworking and done everything I can to avoid falling back into the trap of welfare. But growing up and seeing the inequality in the world and seeing how there's this huge growing gap between the haves and the have-nots, and not being too happy about it, but also not really thinking that government is a great idea either, because, well, first of all, I grew up in not my entire childhood, but a significant portion of my childhood. We grew up in California and in Los Angeles in particular. And so we saw a lot of government initiated violence. We were never taught that police were our friends. We were never taught that the state is our friend. So I was kind of always an anarchist, but I would say in my younger days, I was much more of an anarcho-socialist than where I'm at now. I definitely did not like the government. I definitely did not think that we needed a government, but I was very much in favor of redistributing the wealth. That was a one-handed air quotes there. I was very much in favor of having some sort of system that would dismantle property rights and take everything that the wealthy had and redistribute it to all the poor kids, because growing up poor sucks. I was not very happy with it, and I oftentimes was very angry and didn't really understand why other kids were able to have all this cool stuff, and meanwhile we were going to school hungry with holes in our jeans. It sucked. So growing up, me and my little brother actually started doing music when we were really young. I think I was about 18 years old when I started, and he was 15 when we started recording music. And we had a group called the Civilians Military. It was TCM at first. It was Tag Crew Mafia. And we lived in Colorado at the time of the Columbine Massacre, and everybody got mad at us and wanted us to change our name because TCM was what they were calling the trench coat mafia kids. And so we decided to take it one step further, and we started getting very militant with our music and started to call ourselves the Civilians Military as opposed to Tag Crew Mafia. And yeah, you guys can go and check out some of that music. I'm not super proud of all of it. Quality-wise, I thought it was good, but intelligence-wise, I've grown a lot since then. So if you do go and look up my older music and you're like, oh, this guy's just a militant socialist. Not really socialist, but there was a little bit of class warfare probably inside some of the lyrics that maybe wouldn't make their way into if I had to redo the songs today. So anyways, doing that from probably the mid-90s, late 90s, up until recently, we put out 2 albums together, me and my brother, and then I put out 2 individual albums under the name Paranoid. If you guys can read the tattoo that I've got right there, I don't know how much of it's coming through, but it says Paranoid. That was my rapper name, and you can go check out some of that music. Look up either the Civilians Military or Paranoid. Very political, conspiracy theory type of music, you might say. So we were making music for a while, and then 9/11 happened, and we were already semi-political in some of our music. Actually, we were pretty political in a lot of our music at the time. But then when 9/11 happened and the Patriot Act kicked into play, and we started seeing cameras popping up everywhere, we started seeing every single thing that you do being tracked and monitored, and basically 1984 sprouting up all around us. We definitely took a much more anti-government slant towards our music. And there's a lot of it out there. Like I said, I'm not trying to plug my music the whole show, but if you want to, you can go check it out. So I was strongly doing music for a number of years. My little brother actually passed away 2 years ago at the very young age of 29. He basically drunk himself to death. He had a drinking problem. When you start examining what's going on in the world around you, when you start realizing all the things that are going on, all the things that you've been lied to your entire life about, It can have different effects on different people. And on my little brother, he kind of slipped into a real bad slump of depression and started drinking really heavily, and it just continued and continued until the point where it killed his liver. And again, we grew up poor. We didn't have good health care. We didn't have super rich people healthcare plans. So my brother did not receive the care that maybe somebody else with more finances would have received. Not saying that it's right or wrong, just saying that it is what it is. And he passed away before he even reached 30 years of age. So that kind of put a damper on my music career, as it may be. But it didn't really put a damper on my wanting to be vocal. And even before he died, I was already doing radio shows. I had been interviewed on a number of radio shows for the music that we did. And I also had an invitation from one of my friends, Ghost Dog, to come on his radio show, which was titled Ghost of the Republic. And we would record episodes every single week and interview different political activist musicians. And so that was kind of my break into the radio business. I did that for about a year and a half maybe, and then moved on to doing my own show, which was called Sovereignty Sundays. And Sovereignty Sundays was a radio show in a particular period of my life where I was really into studying the law. Growing up in the economic situation that I did, a lot of my friends went to jail for victimless crimes. Majority of my friends were minorities, which is kind of strange. Kind of like a paradox in terms right there. Majority of my friends growing up were either Mexicans or black kids. And a lot of them went to jail. I myself went to jail quite a few times, mainly for victimless crimes, being caught with a plant in your pocket, or being caught with some sort of powder in your pocket, or being caught with a gun in your car when you're not supposed to have a gun because you no longer have the right to defend yourself. I have other friends that went to jail for more serious crimes, but a lot of my friends growing up ended up going to prison for drug convictions and other victimless crimes. And I was not very happy about it. And I was looking at going back to jail myself. And so I started studying the law because I felt like there was something terribly wrong with the legal system. And from studying the law, I started getting into all the sovereignty, commercial redemption guru stuff. Most of it, if you're just getting into that stuff, don't take my word for it, but I found 99% of that stuff to be a complete waste of time. And 99% of the people that were promoting those types of ideas, I found them to be snake oil salesmen and people that just take advantage of people in need. And so I've kind of veered away from that. But during that part of my life, during that path, I met a cat named Mark Stevens. And this was at a conference in Utah. I was invited out to speak and do a performance at a concert or a conference called the Axiom Conference that was held in Utah a few years back. And while I was there, they had a host of different speakers there, and Mark Stevens from the No State Project was there. And I had come across his stuff, and I had read I had bought his book, and I was reading through it at the time, and I had read a lot of the articles that were on his website, and he seemed to make a lot of sense. And as fate would have it, when I got flown out there, the guys that came to pick me up were also picking up Mark. And so I got to, it was probably one of the coolest weekends of my life. I got to pick Mark's brain about a bunch of different stuff. And I got to get told why I was incorrect on a lot of my beliefs. And it was kind of a humbling experience, but a very informative experience as well. And from being able to meet Mark, I was actually knee deep in like 3 or 4 court cases at the time, trying to help people out when I had absolutely no idea what I was doing myself. I had never gotten any of my own cases thrown out. I had helped one person get a case thrown out, and she had actually gotten hers thrown out, but I had lost a bunch of other cases. And people were still being like, well, okay, I'll try what you're talking about and we'll see how it works. I met Mark. I went over, he kind of ironed out some of the inconsistencies in my theories. And after that weekend, I went back and the very first case that we tried after that, we tried Mark Stevens' stuff, and that case was dismissed. And from that point on, we started getting all kinds of cases dismissed. Not every single case, but I would say at least 3 out of 5 cases we were starting to get dismissed, kind of just left and right. And the ones that weren't getting dismissed were usually, I've seen a lot of really strange stuff in the courtroom. I've seen prosecutors demanding 3 years of prison time, and then somebody asking 2 or 3 questions of the witness, getting the witness declared incapable of testifying. And even though the judge might not throw the case out at that time, watching the prosecutor do a complete 180 and be like, we think that maybe just a month or 2 of probation would serve the interests of justice best in this case. So I've seen a lot of really crazy stuff in the court cases. I've got a really good understanding of all of the illegitimate aspects of the legal system and how to pin them down and how to basically back them into a corner. And so sometimes that takes up a little bit of the content of what we talk about on the radio show, Live Free FM, and that might be some of the things that I explore further on this TV show, Live Free TV, right here on the Voluntary Virtues Network. From there, I kind of moved out of the sovereignty crowd and started exploring the ideas of personal autonomy. And that basically led me straight back to anarchism, which is where I kind of started out at. But before that, when I was going through my whole Patriot Act, 9/11, governments cracking down on civil liberties, I kind of took a detour from anarchism and went into minarchism for a while and was a very limited government type of guy. I thought the government should only be limited to certain things, and one of those things, which is we all have these issues where we're all like, government is out of control. Government does all this crazy stuff. I can't stand government. But there is that one thing that I think government is necessary to do. And for me, being that I grew up poor, being that my mother was not physically capable of holding down a job, and if it wasn't for government handouts, I probably would have starved to death. I'm willing to admit that. For me, I still felt it was absolutely necessary to have some sort of safety net that was provided by tax dollars to make sure that the poorest amongst us didn't just starve to death in the streets. And so I was still a minarchist. I thought all this crazy war on terrorism was a bunch of bullshit. I thought all of the giant corporate subsidies that were handed out left and right, the giant banker bailouts, I was totally against all that stuff. Police brutality, crooked court systems, which I had went through myself, which I'd watched many of my friends go through. Totally against all of that stuff. Totally thought that those types of services would be better provided if they weren't provided by the government. But I still thought that we needed to have some sort of safety net for the poorest people. So I still clung on to that little bit of government. I was just that tiny bit of minarchist. Because I didn't want people like my mom. I didn't want kids like myself when I was a child to basically starve to death in the streets. So at the time, I had never thought of another way of addressing those problems other than letting the government do it. So I was still a little bit of a minarchist, but I thought if we could just get them back to the Constitution, if we could just get them back to where their powers were limited like they were back in the 50s or back in the early 1900s or back in the more you start to study history, the more you start to realize like it wasn't peaches and cream in the 50s. It wasn't all dandy in the early 1900s. This is a situation that's been going on since the initial ink was applied to the Constitution. It was being used for tyranny, and it's not anything new. There's nothing new under the sun, as they might say. So from going there and then starting to research sovereignty and starting to understand the concept that government shouldn't be forced on people that don't want to be governed, people that don't want to live by this club's set of rules shouldn't be forced to. And then I met Mark, and he started me on the anarchism route. He kind of introduced me to the ideas of personal autonomy, and he also introduced me to the ideals that government is an illegitimate idea just to start off with. I mean, not how do we make government best, but is government even a legitimate idea? And he kind of broke it down to me, and not just me. I mean, he does this for all of his listeners, but I was able to have one-on-one conversations with him, and he really kind of twisted my world around, made me do a 180. And eventually, because of meeting him and taking the path that he kind of helped pave, I eventually had all of the last little bits of statism fall off. It didn't end with him. It started with him, but it definitely didn't end with him. From him, I was introduced to Larkin Rose, and I started reading a lot of Larkin's material. And also, I was introduced to Lysander Spooner. Larkin and Mark are obviously current day anarchists. Lysander Spooner was one of those guys that made me realize that even back in the 1800s, there was a lot of problems with this concept that we have government, that we have called government. I went and read No Treason. There's a series of writings that Lysander Spooner did called No Treason, and there's specifically one called The Constitution of No Authority. And I have to say, I was still teetering on, in the sovereignty movement, there's this idea that there's the republic and the democracy, and that slaves live in the democracy and free people live in the republic, and the government is broken up into both of these two segments, and you have to know how to operate in one to be free, and if you don't know how to operate in it, then you're defaulted into the other one, and then you are a slave by consent because you've never taken the time to educate yourself on how you should actually live, and blah, 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 blah. Reading Lysander Spooner's Constitution of No Authority just completely obliterated any last bit of hope I had in constitutional, Republican, or democratic form of government. So I would suggest, if you've never read Lysander Spooner's, that was it. That was the one that tipped me. That was my breaking point. It tipped me over the edge, and I let go of every single ounce of statism after reading the Constitution of No Authority. From there, I started reading economics books. You got Google, you type in Mark Stevens, you type in Lysander Spooner, you type in Larkin Rose. Eventually, you're going to come across some other similarly minded thinkers, and my very first one that I came across was Rothbard. I started reading Rothbard specifically to better understand economics. And then I came across Mises, I came across Hayek, I came across a lot of different liberty-minded, economy-minded type of people. And so that eventually led me to where I am now and where I've been for the past several years, which is basically a free market anarchist. A lot of people that call themselves anarchists, especially left anarchists or socialist anarchists, ANSOCs as some of us call them, ANCOMs as some of us call them, the anarcho-socialist, anarcho-communist people, which is where I totally understand their position. It's where I came from. It was my original roots. But I mean, you get past 15 years old, and you should read. You should expose yourself to other points of view. You should experience things. You should educate yourself. And if you do those things, if you, instead of just complaining about the economic situation, you make an effort to understand the economic situation, it's impossible to cling to the anarcho-socialist point of view. And if you actually start to, if you start to understand and implement the ideas of anarchism in your philosophy, and you consistently apply it to property rights and free trade, if you're going to have free people, you have to have free markets. It's impossible to have free people without free markets. And so that's really what pushed me into understanding economics and understanding the illegitimacy of government or the state is what eventually led me to where I am now and where I've been for a long time, and where the more I study and the more I understand, the more solid of a foundation, and the more I realize that I'm probably not going to move on from this point. I'm just going to develop this point more and more because it's the most consistent point of view in philosophy that I've been able to come across and implement into my life. And so, yeah, that's why if I have to self-identify, if I have to place a label on myself, I would say free market anarchist is the appropriate label. But as an anarchist, I'm not too fond of grouping or collective labeling, so it doesn't really feel comfortable. So anyways, what will this show entail in the future? Why should you come back and check out this show? So every week, I'm going to try and do either a half-hour interview with somebody or a half-hour rant about something. I do my normal 2-hour show. If you guys want more of me, I'm pretty super awesome, so I don't see why you wouldn't want more of me. But if you do, you can go and check out LiveFreeFM.com and get tons and tons of archives of all different kinds of shows we've done. I've interviewed tons of people from, well, there's a lot. You'll just have to go and check it out. But this show is not going to be 2 hours every week. This show is only going to be a half hour every week. And what I intend to do is I intend to make like bite-sized interviews for you guys. Have somebody on and interview them on a specific topic and try to keep the interviews to about a half hour long. That way you can listen to it while you're working out, or you can listen to it on your drive to work or on your drive back home. However you want to consume this, make it to where it's easy to digest, it's easy to absorb, and it leaves you wanting a little bit more. It leaves you coming back every single week for more. If it's not an interview, I might just do a rant like I did tonight. But I'll usually pick a subject and I'll go through and try and flesh out a better understanding of that subject. Usually misunderstood subjects where people feel one way, and I explain the opposing point of view. And hopefully by weighing the two, you can come to a clearer understanding and a more consistent understanding. The reason that I decided to do this show was because I'm trying to get famous. No, the real reason is because we all got to do our part. Some of us are, we all chip in whatever way we can. And I like to hear the sound of my own voice. So I like to talk. And this gives me another venue or avenue to talk in. So also to help Mike Shanklin out. Mike does a tremendous amount of work, and he put this whole network together, and I want to contribute to it. I want to make this whole thing successful. And whatever I can do to help Mike promote what he's working on, I'm 100% down. Mike's one of those guys that I'm very grateful that I have in my sphere of influence, and to be in his sphere of influence as well is been nothing but a blessing for me. Also, to just basically help promote the ideas of liberty and to help expand the audience to these ideas. So again, if you want to check out my radio show, you can go to livefreefm.com. Tons of, like, I hate to toot my own horn, but I do an awesome radio show. So if you haven't heard it yet, you need to get your ass over to livefreefm.com and start downloading as many of them as you can, because every single one of them is a gem. Other than that, I want to say thanks for tuning in tonight, and come back every single Monday night. I will be usually live, sometimes pre-recorded, but there'll be a new episode every single Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Voluntary Virtues Network. This is Nathan Frazier for Live Free TV. I'm out of here. You guys have a good night. Peace.